Welcome to Mind Sattva, practical wisdom for modern life. I'm Dr. Mitika Kanabar. I'm an everyday seeker, a curious thinker, and a lifelong learner. Have you ever had those conversations where you thought, this needs to be explored a little bit more? Maybe it's about spirituality. Maybe it's about finding that one thing that helps you bring balance in your life. Mind Sattva is your space. It's your community where we all come together and develop this. Through conversations with guests, we will explore ideas about clarity and about living in balance. Balance is the beginning point, it's not the destination. Every episode is an invitation to think differently, to live fully, and begin again. Welcome to Mind Sattva, practical wisdom for modern life. I'm your host, Dr. Mitika Kanabar, and this is yet another In the Flow series. So, a conversation where we keep things light, moving, and in the flow. So, today's topic is a little bit of a heavy lift. It is on grief. And I'm coming at it from a perspective that spans over decades. And I want to bring sort of a Cliff Notes version of different aspects of grief to you. So now, if you look at the Merriam-Webster definition of grief, it says it is a noun. It is a deep and poignant distress caused by or as if by bereavement, a cause or of such suffering. Overall, it's an unfortunate outcome such as disaster, mishap, and misadventure. So when I think of grief, I think of how the definitions have changed over time, whether it is from a medical perspective or from sort of current literature perspective. However, the theme of grief has been present throughout the ages, through all cultures, in some form or another. Because if you're born, the only thing that is definite is that you're going to die someday. And when you do, there's going to be grief that you leave behind. Grief of those who have known you, those who have loved you, and those who have come to care for you over the years. Through our life, we go through a series of adventures, let's say. We meet different people and touch their lives in one way or another. Then we leave an imprint, a memoir of sorts, that makes somebody else grieve for you. You don't necessarily need to come in contact with everyone. We all hear of either a public figure or an author or a film star dying, and we all have a moment of grief or a moment of silence to ourselves because we are recognizing that this person helped me in my journey in some way. Now, when you bring it a little closer, somebody you knew, maybe it was a friend you met a few times who met an unfortunate event and death, you still grieve. And the closer it gets, the more it hurts. I'm talking about grief today because I am personally going through a lot of grief. I lost my father recently, and it has given me yet another perspective about grief, about death and dying. So I decided to have this conversation today because on the surface, it may seem, oh, all is good, all is well. This podcast was supposed to have been started with Dad and me together. I, in fact, even recorded a couple of clips with him just for Instagram, just for fun. But things change very rapidly and it couldn't be. Someday, when I feel up to it, I might put that media out there. I'm not ready for that yet. And it is okay. Everybody grieves and takes care of grief in their own fashion. And you come to terms with death and dying on your own time. So when we think about grief, at some point it used to be thought that, okay, if somebody has passed away, you need to sort of get over it in a few weeks or a few months or up to 6 months. However, across cultures, grief was never euphemized. It wasn't said it is not what it is, or it wasn't always used in, oh, somebody's going and going to a better place in that manner, like we always knew what death was. So it varies across the world. Now we know that there are different ways of thinking about grief. One is like short term, that you are suffering, you are in pain, it's intensely painful period. And that may be also debilitating for some. Whether somebody gets over it in a few weeks or a few months or a few years, we have started removing judgment from that process, which is very important. We know from older cultures that grief doesn't have like a finite end. It is something that you deal with as you go on. It's something that informs the way you view life forevermore, every time it touches you. It changes your perception of the world as a human being, and somehow it also changes sometimes what your values are as a human being. Don't think of it as a full stop or an endpoint. Think of it as a continuous process of learning. That's the best way to go forward. So, what does literature say about grief? So, interestingly, around the time that, after the world wars, when more medications were discovered, antibiotics were discovered, there was this period where medical aspect was the only thing that people were looking at, whether it is for the person who's going through death and dying themselves, or as well as the caretakers. It was quite medicalized. And then in comes this physician. Her name is Dr. Elisabeth Kübler-Ross, and she changes the landscape a little bit. She does studies of people around death and dying and their caretakers and observes it through decades. Now, there are many people who say this is good or this is bad or it's debunked, whatever. I think it is worth a conversation to understand what she had to say. So Dr. Kubler-Ross talks about the stages of grief. They can come in any order. So in her book On Death and Dying, the first stage she talks about is denial. Denial as in, I refuse to accept that my loved one has moved on. Or I just don't even want to talk about it. Or I can't believe this happened. Maybe it's a nightmare that I will wake up from. Second stage she talks about is anger. And, if you lose a person very tragically in any number of circumstances, anger is quite normal. Like, how could this have happened? How could this accident have happened? How could so and so have been so careless? Or how could somebody have done this to my loved one? Then comes bargaining. Bargaining is also, I think about it as hindsight. Hindsight is always 2020. What if I had done this? What if I had done that? And bargaining is especially tough for us physicians and healthcare professionals in general. What if I had done something else? Would my loved one, would my patient have had a different outcome? That's where, as a community, we live to serve. And when we can't do everything in our power, or even if we did everything in our power, the outcome wasn't ours, the bargaining is almost limitless. So if only then, or bargaining with God, like if you do this, if you do that, then what if, this was not true? What if he comes back from dead? Or, maybe it was a nightmare. Maybe this person is not truly lost. Maybe it's not truly drowned. Maybe that person will emerge again. So that's when the bargaining can also happen. Then another stage is depression. Feelings of sadness, changes in your sleep pattern, lack of energy. This you will see almost right away. The first thing we like to tell people who are grieving is, are you eating well? Are you sleeping well? Because these are the things that are going to go when the loved one is in the hospital or sick, or even after the death has happened. So this is something we have to take care of for each other. So as far as feeding and clothing and taking care of yourself, it's very important to do so, and yet you don't feel like doing that. And then the final stage is acceptance, where you kind of make peace with the fact that, okay, this person has passed. So it may have been God's will, it must have been their time to go. We don't know what the big intentions are. Kind of we leave it up to a higher power or Mother Nature or science. We let it go in some way or form. So even if you have reached a certain amount of acceptance, it doesn't mean that tomorrow morning you're going to wake up without denial, or you're not going to have a memory or an incident that reminds you of that person. That is not going to bring up the denial, the bargaining, the anger, all of that, and much more, right? There's so many more things that come around grief. So be prepared for that. Don't resist it. Emotions have one purpose. Emotions have the purpose of flowing. The more we resist, the more we are going to tuck it away to become bigger problems in the future. We have to let the emotions flow. And of course, we should find support from each other for this. Maybe not everybody understands grief, your grief like you do. It's even if the same person in the family, we have played different roles in each other's lives. So not everybody in an entire family or extended family is going to feel grief the same way. And this is very important to know. And this is a word of caution. We might want to hastily judge somebody else's grief. Oh, you did this. This is not how I grieve. This is how I grieve. And whatever Olympics of grieving that are going on. It may be one of two things. One is, well, you just want to be judgmental. Can't help you there. The second is you want to be judgmental about somebody else's grief so that you don't face your own. It is a way of deflecting your own grief. Either ways, talk to somebody, talk to a coach, therapist, whoever, and get the help that you need, or even talk to each other. So I want to go into a little bit of the cultural connotations. So when I talked about like depression, not wanting to do anything, that kind of apathy, don't want to feed myself, don't want to sleep, whatever that is. We know that in the Western culture, there's this concept of, okay, we are going to drop some food at somebody's place. And I think that's true pretty much in all cultures across the earth. In Indian culture, it's like you're not going to cook anything for a period of days, 13 days or whatever, or a few days at least. And people are going to give you food or you're going to order food or whatever. So that you are not busy with the kitchen, but you're actually taking the time to grieve. And also that's how the community gets together to support you. So community support is extremely vital and important. Not just from feeding perspective, but now you have a disease. Now what are you going to do with the dead body? What are you going to do with the corpse? How are you going to move your loved one to the funeral grounds? How is the arrangement going to be? How is the food afterwards going to be? What are the rituals that need to be followed? The person who's grieving the most is in no place to take care of all of that. They can do up to some extent, but they're not going to be entirely functional all the way. And that's where the whole community comes in. Your near and dear ones have to show up. So in my culture, there is a thought that it's okay to miss a wedding, but never miss a funeral. And it's not very widely known. I don't know if it's actually written down in any scripture. Probably it is. I have no idea. There's no way I can read all the scriptures. But it's more of a community feeling that gets handed down to you through the spoken knowledge of the family. You can miss as many weddings as you want, but don't miss a funeral. Because you don't know how you can be of help to somebody until you show up. And also, it's a way to pay respect for those who are departed because they touched our lives in some way. For the traditional Hindu rituals, it's like we all have to do certain procedures around death and dying, which Fortunately or unfortunately, we don't know until it's our time sometimes. And the community coming together, helping you kind of figure this out when your brain has stopped working, is so beautiful and so important. And I'm thankful for everybody who showed up and supported. It is another level of gratitude. It's another level of karma. Like in that moment, you realize what karma truly is. Whether it is your karma, whether it is the deceased karma, whether it is the karma of the people who are showing up, how it actually works and gets together. Not just around the funeral or around the prayer meeting, but in the months that follow. I Googled about length of time for different cultures and their grieving. And Google told me in Hinduism, grief is 13 days. And I'm like, oh my, Google has a problem. Okay, don't Google this. This is wrong. Eastern cultures in general think grieving is done over long term. So, for example, um, you are allowed or even welcome to stay away from bigger spiritual practices for a year so that you get the time to grieve. And even in that 13-day period after that, there are certain rituals to be followed. And it's, I think both. You are also wishing well to the deceased, but at the same time, the priest, who's a different priest, because there are different subspecialties in priests. So I did not know this. But this other priest will come in and teach you about death and dying, about what's written in the scriptures, maybe in short in today's day and age, but also help you process in some way what just went on. And I'm sure that's true for other religions, other cultures, what have you. So it is a period not to just bid goodbye and farewell and hope you get moksha, but it's also a period of beginning to let that sink in and begin your grief process. It's not the ending. 13th day is not the end. Technically, it's supposed to go on for at least a year for us. So I think you can't talk about death and dying without talking about Krishna and Shiva. So Shiva is the eternal flame, right? He's the eternal power. And he's the one you pray to. You've heard of, many of us have heard of the Mrityunjay mantra around COVID, right? When people were praying in mass for this big pandemic to get saved from this pandemic for whoever. Like it's kind of like a big meditation for everybody out there. And so there's this mantra which is called the Mrityunjay mantra. It means conquering over death. Literally, that's what it means. And again, the philosophical term might be not necessarily conquering death, but making the death a little gentler for the person who's going through it, death and dying. Okay? So it goes thus. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanan Mrityur Mokshiyamamritat. So it's just praising Shiva. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam. So these are all praises for Shiva. Uruva Rukumiva Bandhanan Mrityur Mokshiyamamritat. Uruva means cucumber. And how a cucumber, when it's ready, if you've ever grown a cucumber, when it's ready, you go to pluck it from the vine, it literally comes out in your hand. If it doesn't, then it's not time to stop pulling at it, stop yanking the poor vine, okay? But if it comes off, that means it's ready. So make death as simple as possible. Either you let me go easily, don't make me suffer for long, or you let me triumph over death and let me come back to my loved ones and live a little more. It's kind of like an either or prayer. And for me, now I'm sure there are many, many people who are much wiser and smarter than me. I would love to know what your feelings are when you chant the Mrityunjay mantra or when you hear it. Because everybody I know has a different feeling that they associate with that chant. So it's always it's swadhyaya, right? We are trying to explore ourselves, our spirituality when we do any of these things. I would love to hear yours. Krishna. So Krishna is the manager, right? He is the supreme manager, maintainer, or Vishnu, Mahavishnu of the universe. So you pray to him to save your loved one. And if your loved one isn't saved, like guess whom you're going to be allowed to get angry at? It's going to be poor old Krishna. And then yet again, right? You are supposed to come face to face because all the rituals around death and dying are going to be about these two folks, Shiva, Krishna, and then number of other entities. But um, after a body is cremated, you get the leftover, the bones, right? Some of them, um, the ashes, and some pieces of bone in there, and they are put in this earthen clay pot. And it's kept outside the house until it's time. So within the first 10 days, you're supposed to go put them in a holy river or a holy water body of some kind. And those ashes basically are kind of, you go back into the earth from which you came. That's the idea. But that process of what we call asti visarjan, as in we are putting the ashes back in the water, guess whom we are praying to again? It's going to be our good friend Krishna or Vishnu. And it's because you're wishing well to the dearly departed so that they get a good afterlife, rebirth, whatever it is that you believe in or don't believe in. You still can wish them well. So the priest, again, the super specialized priests who do these things will do all of the chants and everything for you. And you participate in that yourself, ideally on the banks of the Ganga River. And you wish that this beautiful scene be their sort of final visiting place for you because we don't bury the dead, right? So that's kind of the idea. So before I get ahead of myself around this, I do want to mention that, there are certain songs, hymns, prayers that we sing, right, on big occasions. And all of this is reminding me of that one song. So there are these ideas that when you are dying, right, who's the god of death? It's Yam. And who is the god of salvation or moksha? It's Krishna or Srinathji or Vishnu, or whichever name of the thousands of names that he has that you want to refer him to. So there was a song we would sing growing up, and I would like to repeat some of those lines. It basically is about how Vishnu or Krishna or Srinathji lives in my house. Mara ghatma birajata Srinathji, Yamunaji, Mahaprabhuji. Maru manadu che gokul vanaravan. Mara tanana anganiyama tulasi navan. Mara prana jivan. Okay. So my house is where Vishnu resides. My mind is like Gokul, and in my house, my body, I think of Tulsi as my pran, as my life. So after it talks about how, being born human is this incredible opportunity to do the good works to meet Krishna or Mohan, it goes into the last part, as in this is my dying wish. Mari anta samay keri suno re arji le jo sharano ma shriji bhava daya re kari. Mane teda re yama ke rakha dina ave maronath teda ave. So it says, in my final moments, I have this prayer to you that the person who comes to collect my soul should be Sriji Baba or Vishnu or Krishna in all your immense blessing on me. That Yama should never come to get me, but it should only be Krishna who gets me and takes me to the afterlife and into my next life. Or maybe this is it, that I get moksha and I meet him. So that's just a beautiful poem, and we don't know who the author is. but it's just a beautiful feeling. Mane teda re yamakar wakadina ave, marona teda ave. And so that's what I wanted to bring today. And I want to end today with this one poem that actually Dr. Kübler-Ross wrote in her book, and it's from Rabindranath Tagore. And I'm going to read, it's a couplet from one of his poems. So Rabindranath Tagore is one of the most famous poets of India. In fact, he wrote the national anthem. So, on the fear of death, let me not pray to be sheltered from dangers, but to be fearless in facing them. Let me not beg for the stilling of my pain, but for the heart to conquer it. Let me not look for allies in life's battlefield, but to my own strength. Let me not crave in anxious fear to be saved, but hope for the patience to win my freedom. Grant me that I may not be a coward, but feeling your mercy in my success alone. But let me find the grasp of your hand in my failure. Rabindranath Tagore, Fruit Gathering. All right, so we talked about a few heavy things today. And remembering those who once were. So as we say in Gujarati, Avjo, we shall meet again. Thank you for joining me today on Mind Sattva, Practical Wisdom for Modern Life. If today's episode sparked something within you, I hope you share it with a friend who may need it too. We discussed some ideas and concepts. Let's take some time to observe them in nature or in daily life. Until then, let's stay curious, grounded, and remember that balance is not a destination, it's just a beginning. Let's meet again, or Aujo.